welcome to the CEC Report for October 23rd, 2015. I'm Elisa Barwick, and joining me today is CEC leader Craig Isherwood. Welcome, Craig.
Yeah, thanks Elisa. It's good to be back after a while.
Yep, and we've got plenty to discuss. Today we're discussing Obama's global assassination program could bring him down, and join the campaign to defeat UN plan for a green dictatorship. So first of all, Obama's global assassination program could bring him down. Now, over the last week, a growing list of indictments against US President Barack Obama has emerged, which may finally lead to his impeachment. And this is important because people may say, well, he'll be out by the end of next year anyway, because there's a change of presidency, there's an election. But look, the point is, if the truth is not brought out and if justice is not brought to bear, we're going to see a continuation of the same thing as we saw from Bush and Cheney through this Obama presidency. So let's have a look at the various indictments that are emerging, and the first and the biggest is what's called the drone papers. And these are 8 papers that have been released by the investigative reporting website known as The Intercept, which was co-founded by Glenn Greenwald, and he of course was the guy that first published the Edward Snowden documents that were released. And these are the drone papers are government documents. They were leaked from an intelligence community source who works in the exact types of programs that the documents reveal. So he was on the inside of this, and this is what he's leaked. And what it reveals are that thousands of people were targeted for assassination by drone strikes in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Yemen and Somalia. They were hunted down and killed without any kind of trial or any judicial process. So this is illegal activity we're talking about. Now, I'm going to show some of the slides, just a handful of slides from those drone papers, which give you a bit of a sense of what has been revealed here. The first slide that you'll see on the screen is Operation Haymaker, and you'll see at the top a series of headshots, and these are the people that were actually targeted for assassination, and they've been stamped EKIA, which is Enemy Killed in Action. And this is a classification that was put upon these people to name them as terrorist and enemy combatants, basically to cover up a crime, because the point is that 70 to 90% of the people that have been killed by this program, and it's estimated it to be in the vicinity of about 5,000 people killed by this drone program, but 70 to 90% of those killed were not actually named on target lists. So they were essentially collateral damage. And we'll come back to that later of how that occurs. The second slide here shows, you'll see the reference there, we can possibly highlight it, referring to the target packages being listed on baseball cards. And people might have heard this story, which has come out before, that basically the intelligence agencies put the information about the targets into a simplified form onto what they call baseball cards for President Obama, so that he could go through, and there's famous stories about his Tuesday meetings where he goes through and he apparently takes great glee out of doing this, of selecting the people to be on the so-called kill list from these baseball cards. The next slide, you'll see they're referring to operations referring to find, fix and finish. And this refers, and this is chilling stuff actually, they first find the target, they put a fix on the target and follow the target, and then they finish the target. And you see this little cycle here. This is about the find, fix and finish process and how it feedbacks on itself to create more kills. And it was described by the website, The Intercept, as a cycle of human hunting. Now, then there is a slide which shows, and I've just put this up because it shows the level of detail. This is just a slide. Think about all the work behind that, all the detail behind that. But it's talking about the unsuccessful find, fix, finish sequence and what issues they were due to. You know, they have a whole bunch of other slides that talk about the mitigating issues, such as how far the drones have to fly and et cetera, et cetera. And then finally we have another slide here which shows the geolocation watch list, and this is actually a list of SIM card, or of the codes associated with SIM cards which are linked to mobile phones, which are being watched and fixed upon by these the satellites that are involved with this drone
And
program.
that can be anywhere in the world on anyone's SIM card because it goes through the IMEA coding, which is picked up by the satellites.
Yeah, and they basically can get a lock on any cell phone SIM card anywhere in the world. There's a program called Gilgamesh which can locate, as long as they've got your cell phone number, they can follow that through, and that person can be targeted on that basis. But it's highly unreliable because it depends who's holding the phone, essentially. I mean, there's no verification that takes place between when they get a fix on their target and they finish their target as to whether, you know, they left their phone with their mother or somebody else, or, you know, on the counter at the last shop they were in. So this is a real-time tracking that's going on here. And it is a violation of international law and of the American Constitution, because these are countless assassinations, many of them done on the basis of false or incorrect intelligence. And of course there's the case of all the people around that targeted person that are also killed in a collateral fashion.
Including, of course, women and children, which is...
Exactly.
One of the issues here is that here you have this targeted program by Obama killing so-called targeted people. But look at the rage against America that's building because you're killing so many innocents. Only 20, they're saying themselves, 20 to 30% of people, or maybe, you know, about that proportion, are maybe the actual ones sought, so that everyone else is collateral damage. Can you imagine the rage? Well, not imagine, we know the attitude towards the US in particular as this pariah state is building more and more and more on this particular policy.
Exactly. And Obama, you know, takes glee in this, and it, as you said, it's just increasing the efforts of Islamic State, of these other operations of Al-Qaeda. But there was a 2013 book on the previous year's presidential election which reviewed the administration's drone kill policy, and Obama was quoted in that boasting, "Turns out I'm really good at killing people. Didn't know that was going to be a strong suit of mine." And this has happened on a number of other occasions at all. But, you know, when you consider the fact that this is only increasing the rise of Al-Qaeda, it's increasing the rage at the US and the build-up of a reaction to that, why are they doing this, Craig? What is the ultimate purpose? Because, you know, when you see these slides and you look at you can go to the website, look at more. I mean, they've built up a major operation, I mean, an industry here on killing, targeted killing.
Yeah, when you say about an industry, I think I come back to in the post-period and after Franklin Roosevelt, right? Franklin Roosevelt had a view for the world then of America being like using the strengthening of the American economy to develop all those countries that had been smashed by the British Empire up to the lead up to World War II. So you had various colonies, you had various, you know, Dutch colonies, Portuguese colonies and so forth, and Franklin Roosevelt told Churchill, we're not going to have these 19th century methods after this war's ended. Unfortunately, he died, and you had General Eisenhower take over at that particular point in the background, and he made the point after he left office, beware of the military-industrial complex. Now, what we're talking about today is that military-industrial complex that operates not on the basis of sovereign governments, but on the basis of powers, the financial oligarchy, and so forth, right up to the British Crown. And we've seen this through the Al-Yamama deals that we've talked about of funding terrorism and so forth. This structure is designed to create permanent war or permanent revolution. Now, we've written books about this in the past. There's been, you know, Dick Cheney was one of the proponents of this idea of permanent war, permanent revolution. What Obama's done is he's sort of taken that to the next step. He didn't want to have these big wars, but lots and lots of little wars. So this represents the continuation of a lot of little wars, a lot of assassinations across a lot of countries. So that, yeah, he pulled the troops out of Iraq and so forth, you know, but he's left a mess behind there, and he's gone on to this sort of program of permanent war, permanent chaos. Why? Is because these sorts of wars provide the basis for enormous amounts of money, wealth, to be channeled from the military-industrial complex, but furthermore, it undermines the sovereignty of countries.
And it disrupts the process of what we've been discussing regularly on this show, which is the Rising BRICS Forum.
That's what I'm about to say. Look,
yeah,
people say, you know, we get a lot of Western brainwashing about Russia. Russia's this, Russia's that. You know, Russia's a bogeyman. Hang on. I don't hear about targeted assassinations by Russia. I don't hear about targeted assassinations from China. In fact, you very rarely hear anything from, in terms of China, about the sorts of propaganda we hear coming from Obama. The need to go in with the responsibility to protect, because in fact the policies of Russia, the policies of the BRICS countries and of China, which is part of the BRICS countries, is that national sovereignty comes first. You know, President Xi Jinping has come out with this idea of the win-win policy, that through mutual economic development we can all benefit. And the only time you actually hear the Chinese talking about military issues is where they're actually defending or being forced to defend their position by the policies of the Obama government, particularly in the South China Sea. So there's a big stark difference for anyone who starts to listen to actually what they're not being told, which is a hard thing, because you're not being told it. You've got to think, well, what am I not being told?
Yeah, you've got to go looking.
You've got to go looking. All of a sudden, you find all this information come out, these whistleblowers, the drone papers, saying, look, this is the actual state of affairs here. Here you have a government, Obama, a narcissistic president, you know, as Mr. LaRouche has made very clear, that is now priding himself with being a killer, right? So you've got basically a murderer in the White House who's going around the world killing, murdering thousands of people, and this is what has to be addressed in terms of the issue of justice you were raising before with the presidential election cycle.
And the US Congress intervening.
Yeah, so I mean, these are serious issues, because what's going to happen if we don't intervene and stop this idea of permanent war and permanent revolution? And I think it's really interesting, you know, that President Putin is demonstrating through his actions in Syria that he intends to adopt this idea of having an end plan for the war. Whenever you go into war, you should always have a very clear exit strategy. How do you get out of the war? How do you create the peace? And you see that in focus with what Putin is actually doing and the meetings he's pulling together to try and create that peace, as opposed to Obama and the permanent war, permanent revolution idea.
Yep. Now we have to stop for a quick break, but we're going to come back to the question of Australia's complicity in this. Welcome back to the CEC Report, where we're discussing Obama's global assassination program could bring him down. Now, of course, we're talking about the documents that have been released about the drone killings that Obama regularly authorises and that have killed up to maybe 5,000 people, up to 90% of them may be innocents. Now, the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, and Amnesty International and a number of other US organisations and media have called for an investigation into this. And there is already an investigation going on by a committee in the German Bundestag, the parliament there, which is looking into the NSA spying, because there were revelations about those arrangements between Germany and America. And two former US drone pilots have testified. Now, one of them testified on the intense cooperation on this program among the Five Eyes network of Western agencies, and of course that's the US, plus the UK, Australia, Canada and New Zealand, and their complicity in phone and wiretapping operations and in broader data collection to provide the basis for composing the blacklists for these targeted drone killings. And as a basis of these investigations, relatives of people who've been killed by US drones are taking the responsible authorities to court, not only in the US but in Germany also, because of Germany's role. But of course, Craig, Australia has also participated as part of the Five Eyes. So what can we expect to see as a result of that, and what exactly are we doing? Well,
Five Eyes, Elisa, is the shared intelligence networks, right? That's the CIA, but also military intelligence and so forth. Inside Australia, ASIO, ACIS, Directorate, military intelligence and so forth. Now there's 5 countries involved: the US, UK, Australia, Canada and New Zealand. And the Five Eyes are being used as a mechanism to share intelligence to target these so-called terrorists, but they're also used as a way of deflecting the illegal activities of any one government, Because, for example, if the United States wanted to target someone, right, and that action was considered illegal, then it would just call on one of the other countries in order to be able to carry out whatever investigations are necessary. And the intelligence coming back then could come back into the US, but the US hasn't been directly involved in spying operations or whatever. So it can have the benefit of the intelligence without the blame. And of course, the sharing arrangements between these intelligence agencies of the Five Eyes, of which Pine Gap is a very, very important facility in Australia, is very murky, right? And it's very hard to track. It's completely under the state secrets and so forth. But this, you know, for example, Pine Gap is responsible for tracking or providing the intelligence for tracking for a lot of these drones. So we're right in the middle of this. We're in the middle of the assassination program for Obama. Now, how many Australians actually know that? I mean, not many, right?
Exactly.
And that's what I think there's a lot of upset people now around the world saying, do we really want to be part of this program, of this assassination kill program of Obama? And I think we have to bring this to the fore, as the ACLU, Amnesty International and others are doing.
Yeah, we're assisting a program of murder. Now there's a number, I mentioned there's a whole list of indictments against Obama, so a number of the other things that are coming up at the moment in the US are there's a revival of discussion about the fact that Osama bin Laden, his location had been known for some years before he was actually located and killed, and that was done just before the election cycle for Obama to increase his chances of re-election. This was put out by Seymour Hersh, an investigative writer, back in May, but there was a reprisal that was run on the 17th of October in the New York Times magazine, and also pointing to the fact that the Saudis were helping with the Pakistanis cover up his whereabouts. Obama told this whole elaborate story about how the CIA tracked him down and this was our great capabilities, but in truth it was a Pakistani official who actually came forward to claim the $25 million reward. That's how it came about. Today in the United States, Hillary Clinton testified on the Benghazi question, which are the September 11, 2012 attacks that killed the American ambassador and others in Libya. So, you know, that's ongoing. We don't believe that Hillary's come out with any truth at all to expose the fact that Obama basically covered this whole thing up, because they indeed knew that there was an attack going on, that it was premeditated, that it was taking place by affiliates of Al-Qaeda. And in fact, these were affiliates of Al-Qaeda, as is going on today, that have been assisted and sponsored by the US government. And that was pointed out in an ABC documentary on the 18th of October with former Congressman Peter Hoekstra, who said both that the Obama betrayed Gaddafi, who'd become a key ally in the war against terror, but that also that the Obama administration had trained and armed the terrorists who carried out the slaughter. And the other story you've got, just briefly, because we have talked about it on the show before, is the Doctors Without Borders hospital in Afghanistan having been hit. And I'll just say that the head of, the general director of MSF, Christopher Stokes, said in an AP interview that the extensive, quite precise destruction of this hospital doesn't indicate a mistake. The hospital was repeatedly hit. He demanded a clear explanation because all indications point to a grave breach of international humanitarian law and therefore a war crime. So they are escalating the campaign to say, look, this was not an accident. We want to know why this happened. Was it deliberate or otherwise? But when you look at what Obama's capable of, you could not put anything past that guy.
No, absolutely. And I think, I mean, it's becoming very stark as this goes on, just how deeply involved in war crimes Obama is.
Exactly.
Everything.
This has to be taken into account by the US Congress ASAP. So we'll stop there, and we're going to change the subject a bit to green fascism after the break. Welcome back to the CEC Report. Join the campaign to defeat UN plan for green dictatorship. Now, on the 30th of November to the 11th of December, there's a United Nations Climate Change Conference taking place in Paris, and there have been a lot of events in the build-up to this, and it's taking place under the banner for a universal climate agreement. So this is basically an attempt to ram through what they failed to do at Copenhagen in 2009. and in which we actually played a significant role both in Australia and on the international scene towards that. But this conference happening in December is largely being directed and organised by Prince Philip and his key aide Martin Palmer, and they've recruited this time, which is one of the slight differences to 2009, various religions. We've seen the Vatican and so forth moving on this question. Prince Philip is coordinating that through his organisation called ARC, which is the Alliance of Religions and Conservation. But I think readers or viewers of our show will know a little bit about Prince Philip and his genocidal views. So we want to give viewers a quick sense, and it's really just a quick primer for what we'll do more of in coming shows, of our role in 2009 in defeating the emissions trading scheme, the ETS.
Yeah, well, that actually began back in 2007, Elisa, when we actually began to gel support for the whole idea that global warming is a fraud. Now, you don't hear much about global warming these days. It's called climate change. They've shifted the agenda. But we published 540,000 copies of our New Citizen and got that out absolutely everywhere.
And that was the global warming is a fraud. That was the headline.
Global warming is a fraud. That was the headline, and we got that all over the place. And then we followed that up with the idea of carbon trading is a Hitler-style genocide, because this is what this is. This is when we talk about green fascism, we're talking about using green policies, so-called, in order to reduce mankind's capacity to actually produce. And this was gloved in with the whole campaign that we were working on to stop the shutdown of the Murray-Darling Basin, which today you see enormous amounts of water being reallocated for environmental flows to the detriment of farmers. So we went to meetings in the Murray-Darling Basin to oppose all of this, and I'm very, very vocal. And that then led us to being able to create the dynamic whereby Tony Abbott overthrew Malcolm Turnbull, who's now the Prime Minister, as the leader of the opposition back then.
Yeah, so we've sort of come back full circle, but we have a chance to defeat it again today, and we're going to be putting out another New Citizen on this subject. But just to give you a sense of the kind of dynamic we have to create, back in 2009, this is what a number of Liberal Party MPs said about the process that we essentially created, and some of the media actually, like the Courier Mail, said about the emails that were flooding through to MPs. These are emails that come from the CEC, and there were leading climate change activists like economist John Quiggin and Clive Hamilton of the Australia Institute that also blamed it all on us. But Abbott said his phone lines had been in meltdown. Albie Schultz, the Liberal MP, said, "I've received over the years many emails and phone calls that have never been to the level I'm receiving them at the moment. My assessment of it is that the opposition has no hope of winning the next election. I sat down last night and looked at it, and conservatively, we're looking at a landslide." And Barnaby Joyce, he said, "The Australian public have spoken, they have moved the agenda, they have taken back possession of Parliament House and basically said, do not foist this massive new tax on us, we do not accept it." And even Malcolm Turnbull himself, albeit a little bit later in July 2011, in his keynote speech at the launch of the Greenie Virginia Chadwick Memorial Foundation, named LaRouche and the CEC as the main opponents of the Crown's drive for green fascism.
That's because we are.
Yeah,
and we've got the long history
right.
and record of this, and we're about to launch another New Citizen to go after this Paris conference in December, because this is programs for genocide, and we've got to be very clear on this. You know, Joachim Schellenhuber has come out and said he wants to reduce the world's population to 1 billion. Prince Philip has made the same thing. Population reduction is what is behind this genocidal green fascism.
That's right. And people should contact us so that when this paper comes out, they can be a part of that campaign. It needs to be hard, it needs to be fast. You can also find out more about the previous campaign that we were just talking about, where we defeated it in the past, in the Australian Alert Service. So thanks for joining me, Craig, and thanks for tuning into the CEC Report, and we'll see you next week.